She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain. She'll be coming round the mountain. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. Shack Rouster. Shack Rouster loved his job. As the coal trains would roll by early before dawn, he'd walk up the row houses and knock on the wall closest to the path. He gave it a lick with what my grandfather said was like a police billy club, wooden but bigger, he'd say when he'd tell me, not quite a bat, but he'd use his hands to show the length and the breadth of it, and I'd say likely it's similar to a modern-day riot baton. See, the fear and the horror Shack Rouster employed kept him well respected. He knew the man in each shanty house in town as the coal train rolled slowly on the track, picking up men to go to work. They'd sit in their assigned spots, 4 men to a coal cart. He knew the ones who liked to drink or might be hungover, compared to those who were actually sick and unable to work. And as he walked up the hill 4 or 5 streets deep, another Shack Rouster would walk a path over, going up a block down. These men worked in 2 or more with armed guards down below at the train track, watching as they hit every house if the miner was not already out. See, the women didn't like their children awoken by Mr. Shack Rouster. It frightened them. So she'd usually have her husband's lunch pail ready, and he'd be out the house, so her home wouldn't receive a lick. But they'd clear that town quickly so as to get to the next group of paper-thin shacks so they could roust up some more men to go to work. See, working in the coal mine started before dawn, and they worked until past sunset. It was Shack Rouster's job to know who was going and who stayed behind. Upon seeing so-and-so was not out on the train, he'd rap on the door and go in. He'd enter the premises uninvited and walk back to the bedroom. If the miner was still in the bed, Shack Rouster gave a warning whack to the foot of the bed frame to wake a man up, yep. Then he'd lay a hit on his head to give him something to think about. Yes, my grandfather said, to give that miner something to think about. See, grandfather was a child when he saw these things happening. He told me the miner who took a lick now had the day off to tend to his wound. And whatever ailment had kept him in bed to start with, for the most part, I was told very few ever braved to stay in the bed 2 days sick. They'd rise up a swollen place the size of an egg on the forehead of the man, and some received concussions. Shack Rouster didn't care if the man was sick or hungover. See, Shack Rouster's quota was getting that train loaded quickly with coal miners as it passed. The miners watched with shared dread when they'd see Shack Rouster go into any house a second time. The man may receive another day off with now a second knot on his head, but no one dared challenge the Shack Rouster. Martial law was on Cabin Creek, and the miners were unarmed. Grandfather said not one man got up after 3 licks. He said some died the second day, and all died the third. Shack Rouster knew how to hit the man behind his ear and lift his skull up off his neck. The widows would clean up the brain matter that had been expended on the floor. She'd do her best to move on. Life was cheap in the coal mine, and Mr. Shack Rouster was a paid murderer. Commentary. Pawpaw, who was grandfather's father, lived under martial law during the Paint and Cabin Creek strikes and on to Blair Mountain. He saw and witnessed many, many things, and grandfather saw and witnessed many things. See, these people were called paid thugs. The coal company is who they answered to. Both the miner and Shack Rouster were employed by the coal owner to keep quotas for daily tonnage high. There was no sick leave 100 years ago, nor insurance or health care to get to a doctor, because the men who were underground were replaceable. The system didn't see them as worthy of any respect. Kind of reminds me of today. Anyway, I'd like to share that eviction was also Shack Rouster's job. The miners lived in little more than a shanty, and rouse means to get up or start moving. He delighted in destroying miners' belongings when he threw them out. And I see landlords today who pile up people's belongings on the side of the road. And look, I understand the economics of rentals. However, I'm also aware of persons who are displaced when landlords want to raise the rent or have other inane reasons that they want to displace a tenant for someone attempted eviction on me. Yes, she was a slumlord, and she had the local magistrate court in her pocket. She did not prevail against me, but that is an experience I will share another time. I'm just sure glad Shack Rouster wasn't in her employ. I'd have to take a beating speaking to someone as if I was worthy of respect. See, Shack Rouster reminds me more today of the uncertainty that workers face with the skyrocketing cost of housing as we see it happening right before our eyes. I do these stories for the hope that there will come a time when America herself, like that Statue of Liberty in the harbor, that she will declare a second Bill of Rights as first proposed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. A home for every American was my favorite. Grandfather said it didn't matter if we was Chinese or Russian or French or any other national anywhere. In his experience organizing, every breathing man desires first a shelter for his children and wife, a place to come out of the cold and rain, shelter for the weary. This to me is Maslow's basic hierarchy of need in a nutshell. It's the base need. When I see homeless, veterans, and elderly folk, I am disappointed that we tolerate a system that allows this. We must initiate a living whereby man's innate worth or his soul is valued over his labor, valued over other people's wealth, or valued over simple greed. I mean, it's not conducive to happiness that we live in a country that cannot house its citizens. In Iceland, for goodness sakes, Iceland. In 2008, when the mortgage crisis hit, the citizenry marched on the capital, declaring no one, not one of their fellow citizens, will be foreclosed on or threw out of their house. They insisted the bankers go to jail. It's one of the few countries that took the financial risk takers in hand and punished them. And then they said they will not throw anyone out of a home. Wow. That's radical compassion for community, for neighborhood, village, a sense of belonging, a sense of worth. We all need and want a home to come into out of the whirling calamity of the world. And the so-called wealthiest and most inventive nation on earth, why are we having housing issues in 2022? Simply put, we have not empowered fellow feeling for others' hardships. We think only of our own. Now's the time for a radical compassion, folks, a movement of heart, a perception shift by declaring our earnest desire for FDR's second Bill of Rights, his declaration that every living, breathing American has a human right to, number one, a job, number two, an adequate wage and decent living, 3, a decent home, 4, medical care, 5, economic protection against sickness, accident, old age, or unemployment, and lastly, 6, a good education. I think President Roosevelt and his wife had a radical compassion way before their time. Perhaps it is our time to implement human rights with respectful dignity for all. See, Shack Rouster lived at the time FDR gave this speech. FDR knew what was going on with labor, and he was really unable to do anything about it. No one cared or had compassion for the worker, for the common man. It's time we, the people, open our minds to our full potential of heart that this nation is now maturing itself. And as we examine this disgusting history of labor inequality. We should ask ourselves, what kind of world do we really want to build here? I'm asking you to help me. I'll look back and say, I did my part. I took a risk. I did these audios for you. Will you do yours? Will you share this video? And will you look for the next one coming? There's no shame in my begging. I'm just a simple grandmother who needs your help, concern, and compassion to keep telling these oral truth stories until we stand all one for another. Thanks for listening. I love you. Stay encouraged. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain when she comes. She'll be coming round the mountain. She'll be